Anybody who was perceived to be a Mau Mau, they had their land confiscated. There was also confiscation of property, vehicles and all that. They were confiscated by the colonial government in a bid to see that they can tame the Mau Mau. My name is John Kamau. I'm a PhD student in history at the University of Toronto, and also a journalist with the Nation Media Group, where I write a column on people, power, and politics.
What was Operation Jock Scott?
Operation Jock Scott was the operation in which the colonial government decided to round up all the Kau leaders from Jomo Kenyatta, Paul Gay, Bildad Kagia, Chenganeko, and all those who they thought they associated with the Mau Mau. And they decided to, after they declared the state of emergency on October 20, 1952. So that was what was called the Operation Jock Scott. And it was an operation which had been ordered by the governor with the approval of London, that they have to round up these leaders because they thought that they were unable to maintain the colony as it were. The colony was getting under immense pressure from the political outfit known as Kenya African Union. And Kenyatta was holding many rallies across the country, and he had invigorated Kau to become a very powerful single unit. Again, it took place shortly after the killing of one of the biggest names in the colonial government, the Chief Warohio, who was shot dead as he drove, I think, towards Nairobi. So the killing of Chief Warohio also signified that the Mau Mau, which was the radical unit within Kenya African Union, was now becoming too militant, and they thought that the Operation Jock Scott had to be carried out so that they can try and stop the move towards freedom, which was taking now a militant angle. Remember, there were two wings. There were the moderates within Kau, and also there were the radicals within Kau. So we have these guys who are militants, and they are the ones who had joined the Mau Mau, and they were pushing for a takeover through military means. The Operation Anvil, this took place in April 1954, and this was the rounding up of all Kikuyus, Embus, Merus from Nairobi, and detaining people en masse. This was what was called the Operation Anvil. And so many people were rounded up and detained, harassed, and killed in that operation. So it was sweeping each and every Kikuyu and taking them to villages. It changed the entire demography of the independence movement. There were many detention camps which were opened up. The British troops arrived, and they started now fully hunting for the Mau Mau, and it saw the entire war take a new dimension. Now it was a terror by the British government against innocent people, against people who are fighting for their own freedom, and that was the Operation Anvil. The other tactics which the British employed against Mau Mau I guess here we are talking about, besides the villagization of innocent people, we have the hangings which were taking place during the day, and also there was the detention without trial which was happening in the country. Also, the other tactic which was used was exiling people. Like you are taken from Kiambu and you are exiled far away from your home. The other one was hard labor, especially like the place like Hola, what happened in Hola, where people were being forced to do hard labor. And people are normally never taken to court. In all this process, most of the people, they were never taken to court. They were just being detained and being taken through what the British were calling the pipeline. And the pipeline was like what they thought it was a cleansing process, where you are intimidated to a point where you break down. So it was an intimidation exercise. The other tactic which they used against Mau Mau in a bid to break them up was to make sure that their land, they never get their land is taken away from them. So anybody who was perceived to be a Mau Mau, they had their land confiscated. There was also confiscation of property, vehicle, all those people who had properties, vehicles and all that, they were confiscated by the colonial government in a bid to see that they can tame the Mau Mau.
How did the Mau Mau respond to these operations?
The Mau Mau also response was also swift. Many people, actually it made many people now take to the forest. The numbers of the Mau Mau in the forest increased because people, even those who are fearing now being taken to detention centers, they thought they were much more safe inside the forest with the other fighters. And this increased the number of Mau Maus who are entering the forest. It also increased the level of support which the Mau Mau were having from other communities. There were people now who are willing to help them with the guns, making guns. There was one factory in Molo which was making guns for the Mau Mau, and it belonged to other communities. And if you look at even the Hola, the killings in Hola, you're going to find one of the dead was even a Turkana, which means that there were other people who joined the Mau Mau war. It's not only the central Kenya people. So when you find there was a Turkana in Hola who died in that commotion, in that massacre, then you can see that there were other people who had enlisted to join the Mau Mau war. Kiburi House is quite an interesting house in that this is the house which had been the first house which was purchased by African entrepreneurs. If you are talking about the rise of African capitalism and entrepreneurs and what they did for the Mau Mau, this is where we should start our conversation. It had been purchased by a company known as Kenya Fuel and Tiba Company Limited, which had been registered by a person known as Kiburi Dhombe, who was the first chairman. The most interesting aspect of Kiburi House is that it combined both it worked as a company limited, but also it was inside there where the agitation for freedom was taking place. It was housing all the publications which were being written and targeting the colonial government, educating people on their rights. So you find the likes of Bildad Kagia, they were running newspapers from there. You find Achenga Oneko were there. Makan Singh was there, who was a trade unionist. So this was also the base of trade unionism in Kenya, in that you find that all the original unions, they were having offices there. When you talk about Chege Kifashia, he had an office there. More so, this is the place where Kau had an office, and there was a very thin line between the workings of Kiburi, the company, and the workings of Kau, because they shared members. So you find Jomo Kenyatta was a member of the company limited, together with all the people who are in Kau, and also you find they were also the leaders of Kau. So they owned Kiburi House, and also they could call their meetings as company meetings, and continue working from there as a company, and meet there as members of shareholders of a company, whereas they are the same people who can meet and discuss politics without the knowledge of the colonial government. Muhimu was now the radical wing of Kau, and this was the one which was fighting underground. You know, it's like the one which is most radical. You know, Kau had some moderates, but then there was a wing which was much more radical, and this is the one which was had the Mau Mau War Council. It was operating under that Muhimu.
Who was James Buta?
Buta was an interesting person in the struggle. He was initially I think he was a telephone operator in Uganda, and he was one of the. I think he was working with the Uganda Railway, and he was one of the most educated people within Kau. Actually, he was the person who was proposed to go to London to negotiate for Kau instead of Kenyatta. And the only reason he gave was that he had just got married and he could not go. But he was actually a bigger figure than Kenyatta in the operation of Kau. And I suppose if Buta had gone to London, perhaps even his stature would have grown much more bigger than that of Kenyatta, given that he was far much ahead in terms of politics than Jomo. Momo is not so much studied. I think the military organization of the Mau Mau, because the rankings, it was not like the conventional army. When I look at it, I don't see it emerging like a conventional army. I look at it in that the giving of the rankings. While there were rankings like a field marshal, you find there were so many generals within Mau Mau. I think there was if you look at it in a military way, then in the conventional way, then you see like this disconnect between how they were organized and the way the military is organized. But it had its foot soldiers. First of all, at the lower rank of the organization of Mau Mau, you had the scouts. The work of the scouts were the young boys who would go and relay intelligence into the forest. Also, you had a group which was to fetch food for the Mau Mau, and this was the group which was raiding the farms and getting cows and getting the food. So you have those units which are operating within Mau Mau and doing such kind of, in the provision, what you might call the provision of provision departments. And then you had another group which was which was in charge of armory. And this was the one which was getting the guns from wherever they get them, and also making their own guns. So that is another department within Mau Mau. And these ones, I think they need to be studied fully, because you can see there was one department, which the one I talked about, which was working in Molo, where there was a factory, Mau Mau factory, where they were making all those homemade guns. So the homemade guns were made by a certain department. Not everybody was making those guns. There were those experts. And we had now the other one for operation and the commanding, the one which was commanding. That is where you have Kimathi, Madenge, they had their own outfits. Akina Mbaimungi, they had their own outfits where they were the senior leaders, and below them there were the other generals who were working with them. I've heard the Mau Mau people talk about having collaborations with Haile Selassie in Ethiopia, but I think I do not know much, but their influence on other groupings, not only in Kenya but even in the US, among the blacks, is quite huge. They had a lot of influence on other groups, so their influence was large. What has happened is a sad story of a country that wants to forget. The forgetting of Mau Mau starts at independence. And apart when we have Mau Mau being termed as outlaws, if you look at the publications that emerge shortly after independence, you find that the Mau Mau are being told to surrender. What happens is that if you win a war, you don't tell your combatants to surrender. Those are not the kind of words you use on the people who are fighting for you. You don't tell them to surrender or that you are issuing an amnesty, unless what you are saying is that they have lost and there's another group in town which has won, so those who are in the forest should surrender and they should get an amnesty. That kind of conversation is what led to the continued criminalization of Mau Mau. And it continued, and it was deliberate British effort. Makiu, even at independence, so their people were still here, they were still in the government, and they were the policemen, they were the intelligence. So, and that is what happens. And Mau Mau is not mentioned anywhere in the first speeches at independence. You don't find them mentioned. So their struggle is slowly forgotten. You find that they have to struggle to get their land. Even those who had lost their land, you find they are being forced now to purchase other land instead of being compensated with new land. So it is a deliberate effort. I wouldn't say that that just came without any planning. And I think it took many years before Mwai Kibaki decided to make sure that they undo the kind of damage which had been done on Mau Mau by making sure that Mau Mau, the movement, is not a banned movement and they can be able to have a say. Why the defamation? The defamation, you see, with the Mau Mau leadership, those people, they were very strong. And there emerged a situation where people wanted Kenyatta. Kenyatta was also feeling like these people, they could become a threat to him. And if they were a threat to him, and his struggle, having said that he's not a member of Mau Mau, his struggle could be lessened by the emergence of Mau Mau if it is combined with the Mau Mau efforts. So there was that conversation. And again, Kenyatta had been captured. He was an old man now and having left detention. I know he was in his 70s. The people who are with Kenyatta by then, they had the likes of Jonjo, who are in the legal circles now and who are his advisors on all legal matters. So you find they did not have anything much on Mau Mau. Jojo was a son of a chief, snobbish and all that, and he had no time for Mau Mau. And when he was asked whether they were going to have a memorial for Mau Mau, he said it's not possible to do some of these things because everybody fought for independence in their own style. So that way, the Mau Mau, they were being seen as thuggish. We continued with the same conversation which was there in the colonial government, trying to show them as the thugs, killers, murderers. So it continued, and they were being portrayed as bad people. And then also there was also the church was not even supportive of them. So they find that within the government they had no spokesperson. The only spokesperson they had was Bildad Kagia. Kagia was kicked out of the government very early, 1964. and they had nobody else who can speak for them. Anybody who tried to speak for Mau Mau was ostracized, so they had nobody to speak for them. Whether Mau Mau was a terrorist association depends on who is speaking. If you speak to the people who earned favor from the colonial government, the people who worked for the colonial government and all that, they will say that this was a terror group against us. So it's the same conversation, you know. You are speaking from which side? If you are speaking from the side of the oppressed and people who are fighting for their rights, you don't become a terrorist when you are fighting for your rights. I wouldn't say that people who are saying that this colonial regime is evil, you don't become a terrorist when you are confronting such a system. Well, actually, they were the ones who are being terrorized. It is the British government which was terrorizing the Mau Mau, innocent people. And these ones, they had a legitimate right to hit back. And that legitimate right is even within the United Nations Charter, is recognized as a legitimate. And you cannot be told that you are a terrorist when you have a legitimate right to fight for your own freedom. Whether Mau Mau won the war is another issue. Did they win the war? I think the question which we should ask ourselves is, what was the intention of the Mau Mau? Their intention was to kick out the British colonial government. Did that happen? Yes, it did. Did they win the war? Yes, they won the war. They may not have won it in a military style, but they pushed the British government to the negotiating table. The moment you push somebody to the negotiating table, then that is part of the agenda. It had failed initially. Kenyatta had tried to do some conservative, trying to use the constitutional means to achieve that. But without that push by Mau Mau, Kenya would have not got its independence in 1963 the time it did. Perhaps we could have got it in 1980s, meaning the British would have stayed here perhaps much longer than they needed. But after the Mau Mau outbreak, they decided to review how their hold on the colonies. And the Mau Mau was a case study on that the British have been pushed to the corner and they have to negotiate. So after 1958, you start seeing now there's a move now to talk. Winston Churchill has said that, there's a new wind of change blowing up in Africa. And it is all these movements. I think British was getting tired with these wars. They knew that they can never win this war. And however much they suppressed people, there were still people in the forest even by the time 1963. There were still people, the likes of Baimungi were still in the forest. So, and that claim that Mau Mau had been vanquished by 1959, it doesn't hold, because we still had many Mau Maus who were in the forest and still determined to fight. Kenyatta is a man of moderate. He's a moderate kind of guy. When he went for the cow meetings in Nyeri, and where he said to have denounced the Mau Mau, and which he used that in Kapenguria during the trial as his part of his defense. He never minded the push by the Mau Mau. I wouldn't say that he minded the push by the Mau Mau. And there are many Mau Maus, and you listen to Mau Mau songs and you find they mention Kenyatta and they glowing talk of Kenyatta. They knew that Kenyatta was their leader. But certainly Kenyatta would not have any ranking within the Mau Mau, simply because of his age. He was in his 60s. You don't expect a guy in his 60s to be in the army, but he was the Mau Mau's head in terms of Mau Mau had been inspired by Cow, and it was working within Cow. Most of the Mau Mau leaders, the ones in Kiburi House, they were all members of Cow, and Cow was headed by Jomo Kenyatta. So Mau Mau was not bigger than Cow. So if you look at it, then Kenyatta was the supreme head of the Mau Mau. So these others, it's just like the head of state, and then and you have the military heads who are down there. So the likes of Akina Kimathi, they all respected Kenyatta, and they knew that he's their leader. So they were not going to upstage Kenyatta. So I would say that he was the Mau Mau's spiritual leader. Fena Brockway was a British MP, and he was a good friend of Bio Koinange, and he was one of the people who was against the colonialism itself, the kind of government the kind of the way the colonies were being run, and the kind of intimidation which was happening. And when Fena Brockway, he was the one who even helped Bio Koinange Bio, the chief, to file some cases against the British government, especially when he was being told that he could not grow coffee. It was Fena Brockway who organized for the legal for the lawyers to come and help Koinange. Again, when Koinange was also charged, his sons were also charged with the killings of Warohio. Fena also came in and helped the Koinanges and managed to extricate them from that case. And in terms of Mau Mau, he used to raise many questions in the UK Parliament. And I think this became important in that it internationalized the debate on Mau Mau. George Padmore is also another quite interesting person, and Malcolm X. These are the people who had kind of inspiration on what Kenyatta was doing. Padmore, for himself, he was a Pan-Africanist, and he had influenced Jomo Kenyatta so much, especially in Europe, because he was the one who had housed Kenyatta when Kenyatta arrived in Europe, and also they were editing a magazine with him. Then they took off and went to Russia together and Germany, and then they returned to Europe together. So these were very important people. He was also afraid of Bio Koinange, George Padmore. And in late 1950s, they were working together with the Bio as the Pan-African advisors to Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. With the likes of Malcolm X, they become very important people in that they were inspirational, international inspiration to what was happening. And they would, Mau Mau was being covered by the international media, and they continued to internationalize the Mau Mau war in political circles.
Ando yo,